You are now listening to the Baseball Aficionado. Happy to be with you guys once more. Is your host, Santos. Happy to be back at it. And of course, before you do anything, make sure that if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like, subscribe, the whole thing. And don't forget to follow me on social media, on Instagram, on what they call whatever, X, the whole thing. Now, without further ado, I want to talk about Juan Soto. Yes, I'm going to talk about Juan Soto because this is the guy who, we have to talk about. This is the person who, we can't get enough of. This is the main subject. This is the main free agent in this free agent class. Now, I know what you guys might be saying. You guys who listen to me all the time. Santos, didn't you just talk about Juan Soto on the last episode? Yes, this is going to be different. On this episode, I am going to address some of the rumors that we've heard about Juan Soto, the 4 potential candidates, and why there may actually be more candidates than just 4. Plus, I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on what's going on, because you see, you guys got to realize there's always a lot of misinformation when it comes to these things, and the situation of Juan Soto is no different. When it comes to the free agent classes, when it comes to free agency, right? You guys got to remember, Boras is the puppet master, and he's pulling the strings. And I'm going to talk about why you guys should not trust anything that you're reading right now, because to be honest with you, this is all information being put out there for the masses to consume, right? This is all information for everybody out there to consume. And there's an ulterior motive to all the information. I'm going to get into that. Plus, I'm going to introduce a new segment momentarily to the show, all that stuff and more. So let's get right into it. All right. First things first, right? So what we've heard about Juan Soto is that reportedly there are 4 teams that are in on the bidding and who have either made offers to Juan Soto or are in the process of doing so. Whatever the case may be, depending on your sources, depending on where you guys have read, etc. Those teams being obviously the New York Yankees, the New York Mets, the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Boston Red Sox. In the previous days, in the recent days, it seems like everything kind of has been teetering back and forth, right? Depending on where you read, for the most part, over this offseason, the New York Mets have been deemed the favorite, right, to land Juan Soto. Everywhere you hear, well, Steve Cohen is going to offer $50 million more than the highest bidder. That's all a bunch of fluff. Okay, guys, it sounds nice in theory, but remember, not even billionaires like to throw away their money. So take that with a grain of salt. I do not believe that Steve Cohen is just going to throw $50 million higher than the next highest bid just for the heck of it. There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more things in there at play that we are not privy to. Now, about the 4 teams I just mentioned, while I do believe that those 4 teams are likely the strongest suitors for one Juan Soto, I do not by any stretch of the imagination believe that those are the only teams that are checking in. See, during the free agency period, a lot of teams would check in and they're kind of laying in the weeds a little bit. We've seen this a lot over the years where there would be a quote unquote mystery team, right? That quote unquote mystery team seemingly happens more often than not, and it kind of comes out of nowhere. So, full disclosure, while a lot of you who have listened to me in the past know that I am a diehard New York Mets fan, the New York Mets are seemingly always thrown in on the rumor mill when it comes to the top free agents. But in this case, when you're hearing a lot of things such as, New York Mets are going to offer X amount of dollars for Juan Soto, and, whatever, Cohen is not going to be denied, that makes me very skeptical as a Mets fan. I've seen this before where, they kind of throw the Mets name in there to get the interest level. Not saying the Mets aren't in on him, but to kind of say the Mets are favorites. And then, the whatever the free agent is winds up signing with another team. We've seen this on numerous occasions. As a matter of fact, it's very seldom that the New York Mets have been able to land the number one target in any given market. It pretty much never happens. It rarely ever happens. So that's one of my reasons for skepticism when it comes to the New York Mets in this whole thing. Not saying that the New York Mets are not going to be competitive for a bid on Juan Soto. Not to say that the Mets aren't in the top 2, 3, 4, whatever amount of teams you want to say are in on Juan Soto. But what I'm saying is I'm skeptical that the New York Mets will be able to pry Juan Soto away from the Yankees just because I haven't seen it yet in my lifetime. I have yet to see the New York Mets steal a free agent away from the Yankees. It has not happened in my lifetime. Not to suggest that it won't happen or that it can't happen. It's just to suggest that until I see it happen, I can't believe it. So until further notice, I am skeptical that Juan Soto will be signing with the Mets. Now, again, context matters. I'm not saying that it won't happen or that it's impossible. What I'm saying is I don't believe that the Mets have a distinct advantage over anyone else. I just don't. I believe whoever offers the most money plus whoever gives the best pitch in unison with that money or the right structuring of the deal, I think that will be where Juan Soto ultimately ends up. Now, about those 4 teams, ranking the 4 teams that we've heard about in order of most likely to least likely is as follows. And this is my opinion. This is just based on my opinion, what I've read, based on some of the sources I have, whom I cannot put out who those sources are because, it's a trust factor. So I have a couple sources in the industry and I won't mention who they are. But given the information that I know that I have, this is the top 4, obviously, right? Number 1, the Yankees. The Yankees still have the advantage. Until further notice, I still believe the New York Yankees are still in prime position to sign Juan Soto. Number 2, the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Red Sox are a threat. They are lurking in the weeds. And if you guys have been paying attention to what's been going on lately, the Red Sox have been mentioned a lot. The connection with Rafael Devers, the connection with David Ortiz, who's done interviews publicly campaigning for Juan Soto, right? Do not minimize the David Ortiz effect on Juan Soto. It is not to be minimized. I'm not saying that's going to be the end all be all. But what I'm saying is the Boston Red Sox are going to make an aggressive offer. I really believe that. Number 3, the New York Mets. The New York Mets are still up there. They're in the New York market. They have one of the richest, if not the richest owner in Steve Cohen. Mets will be a factor in this whole thing. And obviously, number 4, the Toronto Blue Jays. Not that the Rogers, obviously the Rogers are the family or the company that owns the Blue Jays. Not that they don't have money, but I just I can't envision Juan Soto choosing to go up to Canada to play for the Blue Jays. I don't care if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is there. I just don't. To me, it doesn't make a difference. That doesn't. I don't see him going there. But again, they have a chance because they do have the financial backing to make such an offer. Now, about the recent reports that we've heard, everything that's going on. Again, you must always take all these things with a grain of salt because remember, Boras he's the puppet master. He loves to manipulate the media. And I believe ultimately, although, yes, on the last episode of the podcast, I made a bold prediction saying that the Philadelphia Phillies would sign Juan Soto. I don't think they're totally out of it yet, although they're not likely. But I think they may check in at the last minute as well again. But more than likely, I think those are the teams we're looking at, those top 4 teams. If you had a 5th team, obviously I mentioned Philadelphia, and the Dodgers will be lurking somewhere. If there is a mystery team that pops up out of nowhere, I think it's the Dodgers. So that's pretty much where I stand on that. But the top 4 is more like a top 3. The 2 New York teams and Boston, I think, are the most likeliest of all likely with the Dodgers or the Phillies popping out of nowhere, maybe. That's how I would say it. So with the recent information that we're hearing, with this recent information of Juan Soto potentially going with the Red Sox. Remember, I had mentioned the whole idea of the Red Sox selling him through David Ortiz, through ¿cómo se llama este muchacho? Through Rafael Devers, through the great history of Dominican players that have played with the Red Sox, such as David Ortiz, such as Pedro Martinez, such as Manny Ramirez, etc. That history can only go so far, but they will use that as a sell tactic for a Juan Soto. Not to mention the history of the Red Sox, not to mention the hitter-friendly park that is Fenway, which is also a factor. It's not the biggest factor, but I acknowledge it's a little bit of a factor. So we're hearing all this and how it went well and how the Red Sox raised their offer. I mean, you've even heard all kinds of reports, which before we get to that, we're going to get into this new segment that I have. It's called On Base or Off Base. Now, On Base or Off Base is a segment where I either read a statement or make a statement based on something that's going on in the world of baseball. And then I will tell you if it is on base, if I agree with it, or if it's off base, I disagree with it and I don't lend it any credence. So here we go. Since this episode is about Juan Soto and the free agency that is Juan Soto, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this statement or mention something that I've heard. There is supposedly a report out there. I'm not going to say who the report is from because I don't want to give this source, quote unquote, source the light of day. But they know who they are. There is a report that Juan Soto will be signing a deal with Boston upwards of $600 million for 12 years. Now, I can't say that report is absolutely false. I can't say that report is absolutely true. I have no idea. I'm not there. But what I can tell you is what I believe. And to me, that statement is off base. That statement is not true. From what I've known from some of my sources that I've spoken to, and from what I've read about from credible sources, that statement, from what I can gauge, is false. And in my opinion, that statement is off base. Okay? All of this is being done. First of all, in the case of that source who put that information out there, I don't know what their point of that was. I don't know if they've gotten bad information, or I don't know if they're just trying to be first to the story or get clicks, whatever. But I can say this. All these false reports and all this information about Boston, all it is doing is feeding into a potential theory that I have, in that obviously Scott Boras is pulling the strings behind the scene and he's trying to raise the price. That's what he's doing. I believe that if you were to ask Scott Boras, and if Scott Boras were to give you truth serum, all things being equal, right? The highest salary or even the biggest salary match, right? Let's say the top 4 teams, which we mentioned, which were the New York Yankees, the New York Mets, the Boston Red Sox, and the Toronto Blue Jays. All things being equal, if all those teams came up with a $701 million contract in for a term of 13 years, let's say they all have the same terms, opt-outs, all that stuff, right? And with possible incentives, the whole thing, right? All things being equal, if you were to give Scott Boras truth serum, I believe, and even Juan Soto, if you got them together in a room and you gave them truth serum, I believe they want the New York Yankees to raise their offer and make that deal. They want Juan Soto to be a Yankee. I believe it. Now, is it going to happen? I don't know. We'll see. It's possible. I will not rule it out. Okay? But I believe if you ask them, truthfully, what do you want for your client? This is what I want for my client, would say Scott Boras. I want my client to have X amount of dollars and I want him to be a New York Yankee. That is what he wants. And I believe ultimately, I think that's what Juan Soto would want. So, yes, while it will come down to comfort, where he feels comfortable at, while he will most likely end up somewhere on the Eastern Seaboard, on the East Coast, I think all things being equal, truth be told, truth serum involved, I believe Juan Soto would prefer to be a New York Yankee. He experienced it already. He was there. He was in the Bronx. Ahora, él quiere la paca, ¿verdad? Él quiere ganar la paca. He wants the bag, the humongous bag. Like I said, the caveat, all things being equal, years, stipulations in the contract, opt-outs, incentives, the whole thing, all being equal. And if the Yankees were right there within that mix, I believe he will sign with the New York Yankees if that is the case. Okay? Everyone else is going to have to pay more. If it's Boston, they have to pay more. If it's the Mets, they have to pay more. If it's the Blue Jays, they have to pay even more. Now, where does this leave the outside teams? Because no one is mentioning the Philadelphia Phillies and the Los Angeles Dodgers. I believe the Dodgers are a separate case. Phillies, I would have said, okay, they probably have to offer more than everybody else as well, similar to the Blue Jays. They're on the outside looking in. I think they're kind of just, I do believe they haven't lost contact and they're still somewhere lurking in the background, the Phillies. Well, at this point, I believe it's unlikely they sign them. I think they're just checking in on the situation from a distance, right? But what I truly believe when it comes to the whole Juan Soto sweepstakes is that you have the 4 teams and you have the 2 teams lurking on the outside, the Dodgers and the Phillies. And I believe out of the 2 teams that are lurking on the outside, the Los Angeles Dodgers are the team that pose the most threat. Now, does that mean they're going to get them? No. The reason you have to say they pose the most threat is not just because of the money, because these teams all got money, but it's because of their pedigree. How much does winning mean to Juan Soto? How much does it mean for Juan Soto to win a World Series again, as he hasn't done it since he was much earlier in his career with Washington? How much does contending and winning right now in the immediate mean to him? Again, that's a question you can only ask him. At this point, we are all speculating. The common sentiment, the common thought is that Juan Soto will ultimately go for the biggest bag of money possible. But none of us know that. We are all speculating. So when you're hearing a report that the New York Mets are favorites to sign Juan Soto, which has been seemingly since the beginning of free agency, when you're hearing that the Boston Red Sox have upped their offer, it's all nonsense. None of us know. I highly doubt that, as I mentioned earlier, I highly doubt that Stephen Cohen is going to give $50 million more than the top offer just because. You know, even rich people do not like to waste their money. The richest of the rich like to save even the most nominal amount of money. And even they like to save money. They'll find ways to do it. So ultimately, this will come down to Juan Soto and the decision that he makes. And that's going to be fascinating. But until further notice, none of us know anything. None of us know what Juan Soto wants. None of us know what he's willing to sacrifice, whether it's a couple dollars on the back end or the front end, or vice versa, to win now. Flexibility, contractual flexibility, whatever it may be. So right now we're all speculating. But as I've mentioned, the top 4 teams are the ones that are being mentioned, with obviously the other 2 lurking in the weeds in the form of the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Philadelphia Phillies, just because you cannot ignore them. They have the bankroll. They have the commitment. They've made the commitment to winning. And until this whole process is over, you can't count any of these teams out. Last thing, as I mentioned in the beginning, as a diehard New York Mets fan, um, in which to go back, obviously, before I get to that part, just to reiterate, I am not a Juan Soto guy, but I do acknowledge that he improves the New York Mets lineup. Although there would still be a lot more work to be done should the New York Mets sign him. However, I refuse to believe that the New York Mets have any advantage over anyone else, despite the financial advantage that is perceived, that they are perceived to have. I refuse to believe that. I just do not believe that the Mets have any advantage over anyone else when it comes to him, Juan Soto. I just don't. Not when you're talking about a bunch of other teams who also have money, and not when you're talking about the New York Yankees. I have not seen in my lifetime an instance when the New York Mets have been able to pry away the New York Yankees' best player in free agency. I have not seen it. It has never happened in my lifetime. I'm not saying that it won't happen or that it cannot happen, as I said earlier. But until it does happen, I cannot give the benefit of the doubt to the Mets or suggest that they have any advantage over the Yankees when it comes to signing Juan Soto. That's all I got. So let me know, guys, where do you guys think Juan Soto ultimately ends up? Is he going to stay in the Bronx? Is he destined to go to Queens? Or are we going to be looking at a mystery team situation at the, whatever you call it, 13th hour, a Los Angeles Dodgers, the rich getting richer situation? Let me know. Comment below on social media. Follow me. Check me out. As always, live life as if you're in a 3-2 count. Until next time.